everybody. Before we start today's episode, I want to take a moment to tell you about something that has become a daily part of my own practice. Young U Organics White Sage Smudge Spray. Now, if you're like me and appreciate the benefits of energy cleansing but want a smoke-free alternative, this spray is perfect for you. It's made with white sage, clary sage, palo santo, rosemary, and lemongrass essential oils. It has added sea salt and blue apatite crystals, and it offers all the powerful cleansing properties and benefits of traditional smudging without the need for burning sage. It's quick, it's easy, it's portable, and it smells really good. Whether you're at home, in the car, or at work, this spray can help you clear out negative energy, reset your space, and create a calm and peaceful environment. I personally love using it all the time, and especially before recording these episodes to create a centered and grounded environment and condition in my body. So if you want to enhance your spiritual practice in a clean and convenient way, check out Young U Organics White Sage Smudge Spray on Amazon, and we will provide a link in the description for you to check this out. All right, let's get started on today's conversation. Hello and welcome. You're here for the Evolving the Conversation podcast, where today we are going to talk about decision. Dun, 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 dun. I'm excited for decisions.
Yeah, decisions are something interesting. I remember before that I started training in shamanism, my understanding of decision was like you can uh, decide something and then change course in that decision. But then as I started training in shamanism and really learning about this principle of decision, how when I decide something, there is no changing course within that decision. It's either I decide something and I fulfill that decision till the very end, or I scrap that decision and decide something new.
Mm. I wonder if you want to actually talk about what is your understanding of decision?
That is my understanding of decision now of it's a single course of action. And from my understanding of decision, to have just decision isn't the only thing that you need to actually get the thing done itself. From my understanding is that to go through a course of whatever it is that you're deciding, first you need the intent. So the intent being like, what is the outcome that I want?
See, I kind of think of it as differently. I don't think of decision as the single course of action. I think the decision is the outcome, and there's multiple ways to get to that outcome, and that's the intention. I think of those two things as different.
Mm. I've been seeing it as intention being, okay, is like the guiding post or is like the guiding light. And then intention coupled with the decision as far as how am I going to fulfill this intention through decision? How am I going to fulfill the decision through engagement? And how am I going to hold that decision all the way until it manifests, which is willingness? And so for really fulfilling intentions, I see that I need three things. I need the decision, I need the engagement of the decision, and I need the willingness to hold that decision long enough for it to manifest. Sometimes it's not always feasible, or sometimes I just want to decide something new, and so I then scrap that decision and I go and decide something new. Like, for instance, if I am deciding I want eggs for breakfast, but for some reason I just don't want eggs one point before I start cooking breakfast. I scrap that decision and then I start deciding on oatmeal. And then I engage in making the oatmeal and the willingness to, hold that decision for like 5 minutes until the oatmeal's done and I eat it.
Yeah, can you give another example of like a more complicated or complex decision that you scrapped and then made another one?
Um, a more complex one. It would have to be something where it takes longer to manifest, I would think. I mean, not scrapping in the sense where I know I'm deciding to master shamanic principles, and I've never let that decision go once. And it's interesting how when I decided that, then following that, there needed to be like another 1,000 decisions that followed that are then in support of that one decision. Now, I think what you're saying though, around like the complexity of like scrapping something. So, okay, I in college decided I wanted to be a business major. I got to the math class and I decided I didn't want to be a business major. And so I decided then to scrap the business major ma and decide on the pre-law major instead. That's
Mm,
an example.
I didn't know that was your major.
Which one?
Pre-law.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's why I'm a nerd about words and meaning of words because the way I studied in college was really specific wording around laws. But
Mm.
that's just an aside. So, how about you? Could you elaborate perhaps on how you're understanding decision and examples of it?
Yeah, so I understand decision to be, I'm thinking of it differently than you are. I'm thinking of decision as that's my outcome. Like that's the place I'm intending to go. Like if I'm going to open my GPS, like my decision is I'm going to the cafe for lunch, and then my intention is to get to the cafe, and then there's like lots of ways I could get there. So my intention is to like get there in the quickest amount of time. So I'm going to choose the route that like is the quickest. Like I'm not going to walk there. I'm going to drive and then perhaps it's almost like, I'm going to put all these options in. Like I don't want the highways. I don't want the tolls. So that's how I think of the intention. Like there's so many different ways that you could get there. There's so many different things that could happen, but yet like I'm still going there. So that's kind of how I think of the decision. I was like, that's my ultimate outcome. And then, um, as I understand it, when you decide, you are removing all other possibilities. So, like, I'm not going to decide to then go to to the Chinese restaurant. I'm going to that cafe. I guess that would be the different decision, is what you were
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah. So
And
then,
I know eventually, like, I'm getting there no matter what. I just have to keep going. But I could have different intentions, right? I could be like, oh, this isn't exactly working, so I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna try a different way, or or like, yeah, or just I don't find this to be doable anymore. But I still like I'm holding that decision, and I still want to get there, but I'm just gonna try some different ways or do some different things, or like this doesn't work with my schedule, it doesn't work with my calendar anymore to go to that cafe. So now I'm gonna like go to the other. Oh no, that's not a good idea. That's not a good example. All right, I'm like losing my train of thought. I'm gonna stop there.
I like what you said though
Go.
about the driving scenario to the store because that's a really good example of a decision where you decide that you're going to go to the cafe, but along the way You figured, well, I have something to pick up at the grocery store. So you scrap the decision to go to the cafe first. You decide to go to the grocery store first and then the cafe second. So that's an example, really, of what we're talking about here, of a singularity in decision. And um, if something changes, then you scrap that decision and you decide a new decision. And so it represents a singular path until it's either manifest, like you decide to go to the cafe and that's where you go, and you go right to the cafe, and then it manifests, or you scrap that decision and then you decide something else, like the grocery store first and then the cafe.
I guess what I have a difficult time with is you saying a singular path, because I don't think the decision is a singular path. I think the decision is like somewhere else that I am not currently, and I don't know what path is going to get me to that decision. But the decision is like the ultimate place I want to be, but I don't know what path that is going to be to take me there. And the intention is like the stepping stones to get to is the path. What I intend is the path I create through my intention and then through my action. That's
Mm,
how I think of it. I think that's where I'm like, no, I don't agree that the decision is a singular path. I think a decision is a singular outcome. Like I'm getting rid of all other possibilities when I decide, but I have no idea how that everything is going to materialize to get there, or even what that decision is going to look like when it actually fully materializes. Like, oh, what am I going to be? Who am I going to be when that happens? What are things going to look like?
yeah, I guess, I was using the word path interchangeably with outcome.
Yeah, but I
So,
don't think those two things are the same.
yeah, now that you mention it, I would agree that those two things aren't the same, but definitely singular outcome.
Yeah, a singular outcome, but not a singular path.
Right. Uh, right.
I mean, maybe like something like graduate from college. Like there's only, not that there's only even one path for that, right? I mean, it could be like I went to five different colleges or it took me 10 years. There's lots of different paths for that one singular outcome. And I guess like the path is completing college, but there are so many different ways that that could happen.
Yeah. So it's like the decision to complete college, that is like I'm deciding on that outcome. Now, how I have to engage to fulfill that outcome, well, that is many things that I have to
Yeah.
engage with, like, you know, scheduling the classes, going through the classes, listening, doing the homework, getting the passing grades on the tests.
Yeah. And then I think that gives you more flexibility too, because, like sometimes you could be willing to do something and then other times it doesn't work anymore. Like, oh, well, my family is doing this now, so I'm not as willing to go with that intention or like that little, like, I don't know if you want to call it choice, like, but I still am holding on to that decision. I just have to engage in a different way, and I'm not willing to do the things I was once willing to do.
I'm glad you mentioned choice too. I often think about that and how it relates to decision. Like I think about it in the sense of like, if you've ever played like a role-playing game, like The Witcher 3, and
I haven't played one or two
I didn't play one or two
or
either,
three.
but the third one's the best. The third one's great. Like I said, I haven't played the first two, but like you go through the game and like it takes like 300 hours to complete.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a serious
That's
game.
dedication.
It is.
You were
It's a great game,
deciding to
right?
complete
But
this
like
game.
throughout the game, you're given like choices to make, and so you decide among those choices. And so, I mean, that's how I see it playing out in real life. Like, you have these list of choices to decide from, and you decide from it.
Yeah, I feel like the choice, I mean, I guess you could use them interchangeably, but I'm not sure if they're actually interchangeable. I think like the choice is like uh almost like option. I mean, it could be like there's many options. I have many choices. And then the one that I choose is like then becomes like my decision, what I've decided on. And then along the way, yeah, there are going to be like other choices I think to make.
Yeah, the only difference though that in real life it's like the choices are like upwards of like millions to, to decide from, right? I mean, like think about it like in terms of, I mean, it's not in millions in this case, but like as far as a college major, I mean, you have a, you know, the choice of every college major that's out there.
Yeah, so that brings what I'm thinking of choice. I think of as choice perhaps more of like an in the moment kind of option versus like, oh no, this is my decision, right? Like a choice is, so I realized the other day I was like in this situation that I've been in before, and I like had this familiar feeling, and I'm like, oh no, I know what this leads to. I'm choosing to do something different. Like, I'm gonna recognize I feel this way, and I'm gonna recognize I know what happens when I kind of like let that feeling like dictate what I choose, what else comes next. And I'm gonna say no. I recognize that, and I'm gonna choose something else. I'm gonna choose to say I feel this, and I'm gonna I'm just gonna do something else anyway. So that's kind of how I see choice, more of like an in the moment kind of like a, yeah, a little bit, maybe like a little bit more of like action, having to do with actions. But then also, right, it also has that thing of like different options.
This is where I think it's good to mention that how I experience decision is in the now. I'm never deciding something in the future because I'm never actually in the future. And I'm never deciding something in the past because I'm not in the past. And in the present day, well, that's a whole nother concept in the mind as well. Whenever I make a decision, it's always decided in the now. And then, engaged with and held until it manifests or I decide something new. And so the way I see decision and experience it is not a future phenomenon where it's something that I'm deciding in the future. It's something that I'm deciding now and holding that decision until it manifests.
Yeah, but it's always going to manifest like in some other now.
Yeah, it's weird, right? It's like it's the
I mean,
same
that's
now in the
time.
future, but it's just, um, but I mean,
I
it's
mean,
just
that's
like
why it's helpful sometimes to have time to like a timeline.
it can be helpful.
I mean, I
Um,
think in a case like that, that way you're like, okay, it's not happening, it's not now, but it doesn't mean it's not going to be another now from now.
yeah, and I mean, it leads me to think of like how often I thought that a decision would have manifested by now, but it hasn't, and I'm still just holding on to it and, keep engaging with it, and eventually it's gonna manifest.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just part of like a process of like being alive and learning how to engage with life, learning how to engage like as an adult. Like
Yeah.
things take a certain time in order to be created. And I think that's where like your patience comes in. And then like a whole other series of practices, right? Like being able to hold like, oh God, I feel like this isn't happening. Okay, I recognize that this part of me is impatient and feels like things aren't working, but yet also like I know things are working because that's my decision.
Yeah, I mean it brings up, what sort of afflictions could come um ab with decision making. Not saying like well, I mean they could like decision making could cause the affliction itself, but I mean like afflictions to decision making, right? Like we were talking about earlier, before we started this episode, and I was saying how I am releasing perfectionist concepts in my psyche, and it's been helping me to just decide, like even if the decision is not a perfect decision, it's never going to be a perfect decision. So I was saying how sometimes it's just better to, decide on something rather than procrastinate the decision itself. And um well, deciding to not be in a reactionary state with fear. And if I am in one and I catch myself in one, to get out of that reactionary state. And so, in my experience, what has been detrimental to making decisions is thinking that I can decide perfectly.
Mm, yeah. Well, it's great that you're realizing what could impede your decision process. I suppose I don't really apply it to like, I don't want to say, I don't apply it to everyday things really. I have like four decisions that I'm working on, and then I think everything else kind of falls under, like all the other things I do kind of like fall into the different buckets that help me to, move, grow, evolve, change into when that decision can like be held and is actually created. And perhaps something like what you're talking about is, in how I would see it, is more like, right, like my choices.
Yeah, it just makes me think about how the intention is the guiding light behind all of the decisions.
All right, see, I disagree with that. I think the decision is the guiding light, and then the intention is like the thing I'm gonna do to, like, my stepping stones, like I talked about at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps just that's where we have a difference of experience.
Yeah. I think something that I've recognized is important for the decision is for me to really like ground myself and like like my, like me and my conscious self, like this is what I am choosing. Hey, universe. Like this is it. Like this is how I am staking my claim. Like this is where I am like grounding myself and like making my roots, and send me all of the help that I need for this outcome to be materialized. So that's something that I've learned about decision, is that it's like a staking my claim, almost like a, like this is it.
I like that. I like that. I think something important to add to what we're talking about um, is how I've experienced this principle of decision is that I don't always need to. Um, I want to reframe this. I look at the decision and I ask myself, is this something that I really need to decide right now? Or if I mean, it's hard to describe in language, but I'm looking at a scenario and I ask myself, okay, do I really need to decide to do something about this thing right now? Yes or no? Yes, okay. what are my choices? No? Okay, then I don't have to decide about this thing in the moment. And maybe in the future I might, and I can be prepared for it. But um, I think it's important, in my experience, of knowing when to decide on something,
Hmm. Yeah, I never really thought, gave that much thought.
or giving it my best to.
Well, I guess that's not true, actually. I was
uh,
gonna say, like, there's been things I was like, I'm not ready to decide yet.
yeah, yeah. And so I would look at it as, okay, if I don't have to make a decision about this thing right now, I don't have to decide about it. All right, I could go on and I can like free some mental space here and go do something else and decide on something else that I need to decide on at the moment.
Are you like all day long, like thinking about your decisions?
No, but the way I see decision is I'm always deciding something. So it's what am I deciding and what am I engaging with? And then I like to put it in the now. So like I'm here now and I'm deciding to create this podcast episode. My intent is to create the podcast. My decision is to create this podcast episode and my engagement, well, that's the speaking and the dialogue that I have with you.
Yeah, I guess I don't really think about it in terms of like everyday stuff often. I'm more, like I said, I'm like, yeah, like a bigger direction versus like what's going on today.
It's like those Russian dolls. You open one Santa Claus up and there's like, 1,000 more.
Yeah, I mean, that's life basically. All of like the little fractal patterns.
Hmm.
Yeah, I guess I'm just not looking at it from right like such a microscopic view. What are some of the other benefits that you found from deciding?
Well, in pursuing the shamanic arts and understanding its principles and understanding decision as a principle, the benefit that I gain from it is understanding that my decision is my own and that it doesn't have to be controlled in the sense of linear time. And I could decide right now something that's going to be positive for me. And I don't have to wait for something in the future to be able to decide that. Now, the decisions might be limited to as to what I can do now within what is possible, but there's still always that decision. There's still always the decision to really, in my experience of these arts, is, there's the intention of shamanic knowledge and shamanic wisdom for personal growth and development with helping myself and with helping others. And then the third intention of divine medicine. And so within that, I see, okay, at any given moment, there's something to, decide among these three intentions. So, what can I do in the moment to deepen my understanding of shamanic knowledge and wisdom? What can I do in the moment that's going to be positive for myself and others? And what can I do in the moment that is going to really connect my awareness deeper with the divine, and how do I use that to better myself and potentially others as well?
Yeah, so it's really positive. And I think powerful, right? It gives you a lot of personal power.
Yeah, so how about you?
Well, yeah, I think for me, it gives me a lot of it helps to create kind of a container of trust in the sense that, oh, this is what I decided, and oh, I'll be provided with the resources that, or, I'll maybe not be provided, but I'll, stuff will come along, and I could, yeah, trust that I don't know what that outcome's going to look like or how it's going to come about, but I know that like I am getting there or that that thing is going to happen. And I think that could then yeah, and I think that kind of goes hand in hand with like knowing that I'm supported and that I'll well the resources that I'll have the help that I need and that too, right, when like the fear or the doubt comes in, it's almost like a no. Like it's a what I find helpful is like when there's doubt, I could like have a reflection of like, um, I know I already know these things, so this thing that's telling me that I don't know is not right. Because I know, like I know my decision. So even something saying like this isn't working, I'm like, okay, yeah, like I'm not seeing it yet, but it doesn't mean it's not working. It just means it's like it's not the now that this decision is coming to fruition. So I think it's helpful in that way too. And again, to really hold both things at the same time, which I think is really important in terms of our ability for like imagination and like our mental capacity, right? Like that we could understand that like, hey, there's more than one perspective for looking at this situation. And just because it looks like this from where I am right now, it doesn't mean that that's not the only thing that there is.
Mm. So just deciding with, personal power and seeing your own personal power through your own decision, your own autonomy, and your own sovereignty in your decision making.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and what else do you really have besides like, hey, this is what what I'm going to decide on. There's
Yeah.
so much other stuff you can't control.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that brings up another point that I was thinking about talking about is that um, with decision making, I think it's really important for the decision to be grounded in possibility. And I mean, you know, um, I think often when I had decided on something that was just an impossibility, it always led to like wondering why. Like, why wouldn't it manifest? Um, and I would like to note though, like I found very few instances of that in the sense where, I mean, the universe is just like creating infinite possibility, but there's also within that like only what is possible at any given moment. So, sort of a paradox here. However, um, like if you wanted to like just like go decide like I'm gonna go be the king of England, it's not exactly going to be a decision grounded in reality, is what I mean. But I mean, most people are pretty sane when it comes to decision making, and
Yeah. That reminds me
yeah,
of this quote. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, I think though in that it could also I see what you're saying. There are some things that are impossible, right? Like if you're not born in this country, you can't be the president. But
yeah.
I also think it could be what's the word? I think oftentimes we have a limited understanding of what actually is possible. So I see what you're saying.
It's such a
And
challenge to be alive, right? Because like going
yeah,
through all of these things, yeah,
hold on. Let me see. I sent it to Louis. I'll find it easier that way. So I think in that way, yeah. But also like who am I to say what's possible? Like there's a planet right now full of like 8 billion people. Like I don't know what's going on all over the place. Yeah, like there are certain things that's not going to happen, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Like a woman who's 70. I don't know. I mean, I talk about in the Bible like these 70-year-old women like getting impregnated. I don't know if that's like accurate or not, but like certain things my body, someone's body might not be able to do anymore. That's an impossibility, but uh, the Bible said otherwise. I don't know.
It just brings up, I think, an important point to recognizing what is possible and probable.
Yeah, I think though we just want to be careful and not limit ourselves. I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
a fine line.
Yeah, hold on. Oh, okay. I don't know who this bolding is, but it does come from this book, The Integral Christianity. It says, in Bolding's first law, anything that exists is possible. And that's to say, like, I have no idea about everything that exists, like I know in my limited perspective about what exists.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean,
Decision
I see
making.
that as being like, I think that's, something that's empowering and also, yeah, like inspiring too.
Yeah,
Because I can recognize in how many ways, like, I've limited myself.
yeah. It is inspiring to be encouraged to, break beyond what the limitations are. I think within reason as well.
Yeah, I mean,
You don't want to go
there's a
too
fine
far out
line
there
between fantasy and,
and
you
what's
know,
real.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like all of discussing what decision is has just like really made me understand how not easy it is to be alive. Like, I mean, whew, that's all I gotta
yeah,
say.
that's sure. That's really true. I was thinking of that yesterday. I was like very angry at life and what it hands to people. But I mean, who am I to say it should be any different
No,
or that it should have been a different way?
yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to think everyone's doing their best. I do think if more people were consciously deciding, that would be, well, I just think in general, having more people consciously aware would be helpful for everybody.
Yeah, I agree that I think if more people were really conscious to the decisions that they were making in a given moment, that it would really bring about more awareness to the collective.
Yeah, but I mean, also speaking from experience, I know that's not easy. There are like many things I'm still doing that I'm like, oh, okay, I see that now. That I've been doing for a very long time.
There are many things that I'm doing consciously and I'm still deciding on it that I know isn't helping me out, like my morning cup of coffee or two or three, you know? Fully aware of that decision, yet I still keep deciding on it.
Yeah, and I think that's okay too. I mean, there's no like perfect or there's no like cookie cutter mold that says in order to get to your decision, you have to do all these things that way. Like that's really I think what's so powerful in it.
Yeah, it's a unique unfolding,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I look at it in the shamanic arts. There have been, you know, countless people throughout, our species as a human being that held that decision, but the way that has manifested has been unique for each and every one.
Yeah. I wonder what God's decision is. Just to love.
Yeah, I'm
Just to
not sure.
love.
Yeah,
I
perhaps. I often think about anymore, and I'm not saying I have this right, but is what makes most sense to me in my experience of God's decision, God's also will is to just be unconditionally loving towards everyone and everything and just complete has the absolute will and the absolute decision to just be completely neutral. And so within that, you know, it that's how all energy is allowed to manifest. That's how literally everything, like good and bad, is allowed to, exist. Do I have that right? I don't know, but it does make sense in my brain.
Yeah, I'm not sure if God actually even decides. Or that's just like how we, is it called like anthropomorphize? I'm not saying that word right. How we put like human qualities on animals,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? Like who am I to put a human quality on God? I don't know if God has a will or a decision.
I mean, this gets into a philosophical type of discussion where I could say we could look at it as like oneness, right? Like if you just imagine the whole universe with everything in it all at once, that includes all of humanity and every decision that every human being is making right now. And I could also expound upon that and say, okay, if God is in through and all around everyone and everything, then God is, that multifaceted 8 trillion human being deciding all at once, plus every other living being out there that's deciding something right now into the multiplicity where my brain just explodes, and I don't really quite comprehend the numbers there. But the philosophical topic is saying if God is in through and all around everyone and everything, then God is everyone's decision all at once.
Yeah, I suppose, I think.
Yeah, right. I mean, it gets to a point where it's just like, okay, I don't, my brain stops here.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe that's a good stopping point.
I like it.
All right.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to us thus far. Let us know if you have any insights on decision and what is your decision-making process. Give us a thumbs up if you liked it and click subscribe, please. Adios, everyone.
Bye.